Hello, I am Parker Lindsay, and this is the Boston Celtics Fan Zone podcast. On this episode of the Boston Celtics Fan Zone podcast, we will be going over the first round matchup of our playoffs versus the Orlando Magic. Now, while the Magic may have only been a play-in team, anyone who kept up with them throughout this season knows that they are capable of much, much more. During the first few months of this season, the Orlando Magic were sitting comfortably amongst the top of the Eastern Conference. But after Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Jalen Suggs suffered major injuries and were forced to sit for extended periods of time, their record had plummeted to the play-in level. Presently, while they are still missing their true starting point guard in Jalen Suggs, the Magic are back to being close to fully healthy, and that is shown in their level of play throughout this series so far. Nothing has been easy for the Celtics. For starters, Paolo Banchero has been playing absolutely out of his mind, especially considering the lack of spacing and playmaking that he deals with while he's on the court. Now, while we are a great defensive team, we don't necessarily have the combination of size and athleticism that makes Paolo so special. Tatum is the closest things that we have, but it is not ideal to waste all of his energy on containing Banchero, especially with him being banged up due to the physicality that we have already seen throughout this series. Now, while this may sound like it could be an issue for us moving forward in the playoffs, but the only other player that has this same combination of size and athleticism and skill that makes Paolo so good is Giannis Antetokounmpo. And it's looking currently like the Bucks will not be advancing to the next round after they are down 3-1 in their series versus the Indiana Pacers. Another player on the Magic that has been playing very well is Franz Wagner, who has also been able to take advantage of his uncommon size for his position of shooting guard or small forward by shooting over our guards like Derek White, who, even though he's a great shot blocker, has just struggled to contest these shots. Franz's go-to move for taking advantage of this size is his fading spin layup, where he will drive to the middle of the paint and fade outside or spin outside toward the block and then fade on his layup, preventing anyone from getting a good contest. Now, without proper positioning beforehand, this move is nearly impossible for us to stop. And in order to address this penetration, where he is driving towards the middle and then spinning out, that Orlando has emphasized, we have seen our coach, Celtics coach, Joe Mazzulla, prioritize help defense, helping in on those drives and clogging up the lane, clogging up the paint, forcing the Magic to rely on long jump shots and long twos, long threes, which is definitely not the strong suit of their offense. Now, this adjustment that we have made also allows for us to play a more physical brand of defense, getting our hands on the ball and making sure that nothing is coming easy for the Magic offensively. And as we have seen throughout this series, the refs are fully allowing both teams to play physically and really just not blowing the whistle a whole lot. Now, the Magic have fully taken advantage of this opportunity by playing extremely hard throughout the game and even getting what some, maybe me, may consider to be a few cheap shots in on our superstars, namely the flagrant fouls committed by Caldwell Pope and the one elbow that Goga Bitadze threw to Porzingis, which left a huge gash on his forehead. But this is, as I said, resulted in a few lingering injuries for some of our superstars in Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, and Kristaps Porzingis. Now, while these fouls are surely not purely intent on injuring these players, I think that this physical basketball that their coach chose to play throughout this series and their team chose to play throughout this series, the main objective of that is certainly wearing us down and maybe not injuring us, but making us feel more banged up and just making it harder for us to continue. Now, another contributing factor to this is the fact that the Magic have plenty of big physical players, like the two we previously discussed in Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. Then they have plenty of other guys who may not be superstars, but they sure fit that huge guy, athletic, big build. And those are Wendell Carter Jr., center, who is, not the biggest guy in the world, but tallest guy in the world, but he is big, very stout. They also have Jonathan Isaac, who is probably the biggest small forward in the league, looking at about 7 foot and just makes anyone who he's guarding look small out there. Anthony Black, another huge guard, about 6'7", and just long arms, clogs up the lanes. And then Goga Badatse, who I mentioned got Porzingis with the elbow, who is a huge Georgian guy, a 7-footer, who is just extremely hard to move and can move other people pretty easily. So this is certainly what this Magic team is built around, this big physical style of basketball. Now, while it may not be their time currently, especially when they run into us in their first round matchup, this young Magic team surely has a very bright future ahead of them. So now that we have spent a little bit of time on the Magic and gone over them, I think it's a good time for us to take a look at our Boston Celtics, the point of this podcast. And I think a good starting point for this, especially in this series, is talking about our starting point guard, Drew Holiday. Now, this series has not been easy for Drew at all. He's definitely struggled throughout these games, and I think the biggest contributing factor to this, as I've mentioned what feels like 1,000 times already, is that this Magic team, they are a big physical basketball team. They will beat you up. They will make every game hard. Nothing will come easy. And this style of basketball really just does not lend well to Drew's offensive game, where most of the time he will get his buckets by taking advantage of the Celtics' great spacing and ability to stretch the floor and stretch the defense out. And he will find himself matched up with a guy who is not as strong as him, not as big as him, and he will use his physicality to back that guy down and make a post move, which isn't very common, but for a point guard, he gets a lot of his buckets in the post. And just because of this Magic team's size, he has not been able to find those. And I think missing out on those easy buckets that really get his rhythm going most of the time and can help him get his offense fired up, it has hurt him in all aspects, whether it's we saw in the first couple games, there's just some balls where he'd get his hand on it offensively and it'd slip right through, or he'd make a bad pass, and that is just so uncharacteristic for a veteran, solid, consistent player like Drew. And then also just the catch and shoot jumpers, the threes, the corner three, which is, his strong suit. We've just not seen him been able to consistently hit those shots. Now, another huge factor to this also is the hamstring strain that he has been dealing with throughout this series. And that has actually kept him out of the last two games, games 3 and 4, where we lost game 3 and definitely could have used him. And in game 4, we did well without him, but it's never easy to be missing one of your best players. So, yeah, it's not good. Another guy who is a big superstar for this team, but has run into struggles throughout this series, is Kristaps Porzingis. Now, a big thing with Porzingis, and one of the stats they've harped on a lot throughout these broadcasts, is that throughout this season, throughout most of his career, Kristaps Porzingis has had the highest field goal percentage when he has someone else switched on to him. So, like, say he has a wing on him or a guard on him. Someone is switched on to him. He shoots the highest field goal percentage in the league, which is well over 50%, I think somewhere near 60. But in this series, against a Magic team that, switches everything, and you would think that it's the most ideal scenario for him, he has actually struggled heavily against the switch, shooting under 40%, which wouldn't even be good regardless, but considering the fact he's going up against guys that he has a major size advantage on, it's just abysmal. So he's had to make a switch, and going into game 4, Porzingis in this series was only shooting 28% from the field, which, as I said, is just terrible. But I saw an interview, and he talked about this, where he put a big emphasis on rolling to the basket more. Because of those switches, he wasn't getting the easy, long jump shots that he's used to. So he switched up his strategy, and on those pick and rolls, he's rolling instead of fading. And due to this adjustment, he was able to have a really good game 4. And it may not show up on the stat sheet because he got into a little bit of foul trouble early and only logged 22 minutes. But if you watched the game, you saw it. He made a huge difference. Our spacing offensively, and then the effect that he can have as a 7'2" big at the rim, protecting the rim for us and, sending out some weak shots. It's huge. As far as the rest of the team, it's been, pretty good. Jason Tatum has done a little bit of everything, as he usually does, and a lot of scoring. Al has been a valuable veteran presence. One thing that stood out to me last game is he was ISO'd in the corner against Franz Wagner, who's a quick wing/guard, and Al is a nearly 40-year-old center. And Al was still somehow able to block his jump shot, which there's just no way that should happen. But you got to have faith in the guy. Al comes through no matter what. Whenever we need him, he is there. And you just got to love it. He's a valuable veteran presence for this team. Peyton Pritchard off the bench, the sixth man of the year. He's provided valuable scoring and just that change of pace that he can bring to the game, especially since we don't really have ball-dominant guards. So when he comes off the bench and the ball's in his hands, it just gives teams a different look and makes us that much more powerful on offense. And then Jaylen Brown, of course, who struggled pretty heavily in the first half of the second game when Jason Tatum had to sit out due to his wrist injury. But as we saw in the second half of that game, sometimes it takes a bit to get going, but he was able to have a phenomenal game and lead us to a victory in that second half. So assuming that we can go out and handle business on Tuesday the 29th and win Game 5 and get out of this series 4-1, we will begin looking at our matchup in the next round of the playoffs, whether it is the Detroit Pistons, the New York Knicks, on our next episode of the Boston Celtics Fan Zone that will be releasing soon. So keep an eye out. In the meantime, make sure to check out our website at thebostoncelticsfanzone.com, rate our podcast, and leave a review, and we look forward to listening with you next time. Thank you very much.